What's going on, guys? Your boy Fluff here. Today, as promised, we're going to bring you a guide on the Crusader build that we've been playing a lot in stream lately. This is a high GR SpeedFarm build that will work really great solo, really great in a group, and it's just really powerful in general. So without further ado, let's get into the Condemn Juggernaut. Now, of course, as a lot of you guys know, Condemn's not some new build to Diablo. And there are a lot of variations out there that you can run. But in our playtesting of Crusader, we found that this was overall the most consistent high GR speed farming setup. And we're excited to share with you guys. This build revolves around the use of Condemn. Now, normally Condemn is a 15-second cooldown, which says build up a massive explosion, unleashing it after 3 seconds, dealing 1160% weapon damage to all enemies within 15 yards. As holy. But thanks to the shield Frighter's Wrath, Condemn has no cooldown and its damage is increased by up to 800%, but instead costs 40 Wrath. The shield basically makes it like a spender. You can spam Condemn at the cost of 40 Wrath per cast. So boom, we can spam it, 800% damage multiplier, awesome. We're also using Blade of Prophecy, which says 2 condemned enemies also trigger Condemn's explosion, and the condemned damage is increased by up to 800%. So boom, another 800% damage multiplier, plus the ability to trigger Condemn off of enemies hit by your Condemn. So the more density you get with this build, the more OP this thing gets. And you'll see on a big open map, this thing is super juicy. We're also using the Armor of Icon, which is really nice with Condemn. The 2-piece says reduce the cost of all abilities by 50% while Akarat's champion is alive, which thanks to the Armor of Icon 4-piece, which says reduce the cooldown of Akarat's champion by 50%, plus 56+% cooldown reduction on the Crusader itself. We have 100% uptime on Akarat's champion. We'll talk more about how we get to that 56% in just a minute. And then finally, while Akarat's champion is active, which again is 100% of the time, you deal 1500% increased damage and take 50% less damage. So cool, mitigation, but of course a 1500% damage multipliers. We're also using the Bastions of Will set, which as you guys know says when you hit with the resource generating attack you gain 50% damage, and when you hit with the resource spending attack you gain another 50% damage multiplier. When you combine those two 50% damage multipliers you get 125% damage multiplier. Awesome. We're also using the Hexing Pants of Mr. Yan in this setup, which says your resource generation and damage is increased by 25% while moving and decreased by 20 to 25% when you're standing still. So we're always going to be on the move in this build, so boom, another 25% damage modifier. Plus we're using Bane the Trap, which gives you an X damage modifier, basically depending on the level that it is, for enemies afflicted with control impairing effects. And since it's secondary at level 25 will proc its primary, this effect will always be up. And of course, Bane the Powerful, which gives us 20% increased damage for, X amount of time after killing an elite pack, depending on its level, and 15% damage at level 25 versus elites, and 15% reduction versus elites. And the key, we're also using the Strong Arm Bracers, which says enemies hit by knockback effects suffer 30% increased damage for 6 seconds. And since we're using Condemn with Vacuum, which basically sucks all enemies into you every single time you cast a Condemn, that technically counts as a knockback effect, even though you're sucking them in instead of knocking them away. So boom, a 30% damage modifier again. And then finally, we're using Convention of Elements in the cube, which basically, as you guys know, will rotate through all the elements available to the Crusader, which is 4. And then when it rotates to Holy like this, your damage goes up, up, up like crazy. So boom, 800% from the weapon, 800% from the shield, 1500% from the armor, 25% from the pants, 125% from the rings, 30% from the bracers, and then 200% from the ring with 25% uptime. So the amount of damage you're able to do with Condemn is insane. And density is your friend here because of how the weapon works. So when you guys get a big, open, dense map, the clear times are insane. Now to finish talking about the cube real quick, we are using Akon's Addendum inside the cube as our weapon. So since we have Akon's Addendum in the cube, we basically get 3 runes on Akarat's champion, which is crazy. It's because we get Prophet and Embodiment of Power for free, plus we get to select a 3rd. Now Prophet gives us 150% additional armor, which makes us quite tanky. Plus we get the ability to cheat death while we're in Akarat's champion, which is crazy because Akarat's champion has a duration of 20 seconds. So basically once every 20 seconds you get a cheat death. We're also going to get Embodiment of Power, which increases our wrath regeneration from 5 to 10, which is really nice. And then lastly, we're going to choose the Rally rune, which says using Akarat as a champion reduces the remaining cooldown of your other abilities by 12 seconds. And we are using 3 other, big cooldown abilities here, so that's quite nice. Hasteful isn't really a great choice because you don't really care about increasing your attack speed, because the only thing that benefits from attack speed here is Punish. Punish is doing like no damage, so it's worthless. And you could use Firestarter if you wanted to, if you just wanted more damage, but I just found overall Rally was just the best rune to pick. For other skills, we're using Punish with the rune Fury. Now Punish says strike your enemy for 335% weapon damage. It doesn't matter, it doesn't do anything. And you gain Hardened Senses, which increases your block chance by 15% for 5 seconds. And then Fury says when you block with Hardened Senses active, you gain 15% increased critical hit chance for your next attack. And this has some really good synergy with some of the other stuff we're using here, because we are using Provoke with Hit Me. Now Provoke says taunt all nearby enemies and instantly generate 5 wrath for each enemy taunted, which is a really nice way of getting back wrath, which you're probably never going to need in this setup. Taunted enemies will focus their attention towards you for 4 seconds, and that doesn't really matter. But with the Hit Me rune, you gain 50% increased block chance for 4 seconds after casting Provoke. So your chance to block is going to go up by a lot, so this Fury proc is going to go off a lot more often. Now, Crusaders by default have a 20% chance to block, so that goes up by 15% when I hit with Punish, and then another 50% when I have Provoke Hit Me up. So that's 85% block chance, which is A, going to bring up your toughness by a lot, and B, it's going to make this Punish effect for 15% crit chance go off like crazy. Now the last 2 skills are really going to boost our movement. We're not going to have any movement abilities, so you're not going to have the horse seat in this setup, but you're actually still quite fast. You don't want to progress to the rift so fast that you don't kill everything along the way, so this all actually works out really well. We're going to use Iron Skin with Flash, which says your skin turns to iron, absorbing 50% of all incoming damage for 4 seconds. Nice defensive cooldown, but more importantly, if you take damage while Iron Skin is active, your movement speed is increased by 60% for 5 seconds, and you can move through enemies unhindered. So this can be really nice. It's A, if you're stuck, which basically never happens in this setup, because again, it's a speed farm setup. But more importantly, it just gets you through the rift faster. We're also using Laws of Hope with Wings of an Angel. Now the base rune of Laws of Hope says you gain 10,000 light per second, which I'm not sure why this is still a number instead of a percent, but whatever. That effect's basically worthless. And then the active ability says empower the law surrounding your allies with a shield with 124,000 damage, which is just negligible, nothing. What we're really after here is the Wings of Angel rune, which says empowering the law also increases the movement speed of you and your allies by 50% and allows everyone affected to run through enemies unimpeded, which again is really nice if you're stuck, but again, we don't really care about getting stuck. It's just not going to happen that much. We're mostly using this to again move through the rift as fast as we can, but not so fast that we don't pull in every mob along the way. So we talked about skills, we talked about how we're juicing up Condemn. Let's just go into passes real quick. Heavenly Strength. This is what allows me to wear the Blade of Prophecy in my main hand, because it is a 2-hand weapon, and you'll notice I'm wearing a 2-hander plus a shield, and that's because of Heavenly Strength. But of course that comes at a cost at 20% reduced damage, but you still do a ton of damage. We're also using Long Arm of the Law, which increases duration of our active effect of our law, which is again Laws of Hope, Wings of an Angel. So basically we're going to get that movement speed buff for 10 seconds instead of just 5, which is really nice. Plus our cooldown is really high in this build as well, so it's going to come back pretty often. We're also using the Indestructible passive, which says when you see fatal damage, you instead become immune to damage and gain 35% increased damage and gain 100k life per kill for 5 seconds. This occurs once per minute, which is just insane if you guys think about it, because we're getting a cheat death once every 20 seconds with the Prophet rune on Akarat's champion, plus another cheat death once every minute. So like dying in this build isn't that big of a deal, just as long as you know when your next Akarat champion is going to come back, which makes the build insanely tanky. You're going to see like we proc our cheat death. We're not so tanky that we never proc, but it's fine, like because we have 2 at our disposal. And then finally we're using Finery, which says you gain 1.5% strength for every gem socketed in your gear. And of course we have tons of sockets on our gear, so that's just a nice flat damage increase. Now some really nice synergies happening here that you might not notice. Obviously, you know, our block chance is going up, which is going to give us 15% more crit for all these condemns that we're throwing out. But you'll also notice, you know, okay, Provoke's a cooldown, Iron Skin's a cooldown, Laws of Hope's a cooldown. We have 56% cooldown reduction, which is really nice. But because of that rune on Akarat's champion, which we basically reduce the cooldown of other abilities by 12 seconds, it's going to give us a lot more uptime on some of these abilities. And because of all of that, the build can feel quite spammy. Because other than Akarat's champion, which is only once every 20 seconds, you're kind of spamming everything else. And I'd really recommend using the numlock trick, guys. If you guys don't know what the numlock trick is, check out my channel. We have what's called the definitive numlock guide. Go watch that, save your hand. But in this particular build, you can actually numlock 3 abilities, which one I would suggest Condemn. Another, I would suggest Loss of Hope, Wings of Angel. And then lastly, I would suggest Akarat's Champion. I wouldn't numlock more than that because that can interfere with the other cooldowns. Then I just cast Punish, once every 5 seconds to A, get that block chance, to B, proc the, half of Focus and Restraint. I pretty much spam Provoke anytime I want because it comes back pretty fast. And Iron Skin I might save if I know that I have to cover a great distance. I'll use it for the movement. Or if I'm actually taking damage, I'll use it defensively. The last piece of gear we didn't really talk about is obviously Nemesis. If you guys are a big follower of my channel, you'll notice we basically use Nemesis in every speed farm build ever. They're just so good. They can speed up a rift, anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute because of the ability to spawn champions off of pylons. On average, you can get anywhere from 3 to 5 pylons per GR, which is 3 to 5 additional elites, which is quite a bit of progress. So this really speeds up clear times, and it's so good. Now real quick, we'll talk about stat priority. Again, we're stacking cooldown everywhere we can because we need 56% to have 100% uptime on Akarat's Champion. Now, if you guys don't have 56%, if you're still struggling to get to that point, you can actually use Leoric's Crown instead of Hexing Pants of Mr. Yan. You'll just lose that 25% damage bonus. But it's definitely an option if you're still struggling to get good gear. But to put that in perspective, if you look at my profile, I have 8 hours, barely 8 hours played on Crusader. My gear is nothing to write home about. It's not that good. I'm able to speed farm 85s, no problem. And finding cooldown in some of these pieces is really, really easy. But for gloves, you want strength, crit damage, crit chance, and cooldown reduction. This will probably be the hardest, a con piece to get. Shoulders, you would want strength, vite, cooldown reduction, and condemn damage. Helmet, strength, vite, crit chance. Chest, you want strength, vite with condemn damage. Again, very important. And again, since this is a speed farm setup, if you can get pickup radius on some of the secondaries here, it's gonna increase your speed quite a bit. Belts, you want the Vigilant Belt, which again increases cooldown reduction. You would want strength, vite, all res, and cooldown reduction. Pants, again, the Hexing Pants, we want strength, vite, all res with 2 sockets. And normally I don't suggest running diamonds in your gear, but because your life pool isn't super great, I only have 470k life in this setup, which is really bad. But it stacks with the esoteric really well. So putting diamonds in your gear can really significantly increase your toughness. If you feel that you don't need it, you of course can put these strength gems in instead. But I really found that with my really tiny life pool, the diamonds made a big difference. On boots, you would want strength, vite, armor, and all resistance. You can't roll condemn on boots. On the Blade of Prophecy, you would want the highest damage roll you can find, obviously. 10% damage, strength, cooldown reduction, and then of course the highest possible condemn roll you can get. Now the shield, guys, this thing is going to be really hard to get. Ultimately, you would want strength, cooldown reduction, crit chance, and condemn damage with the highest possible condemn damage roll. Now to get 4 of those stats, it's going to be insanely hard. I would say this is arguably one of the most difficult items in the game to roll well. Because not only do you need stats that are really hard to get inside of a giant stat pool, because shields can roll 1,000 different things, but you also need a high condemned damage roll, which is also very difficult. Bracers, you want holy damage, strength, vite, crit chance. Necklace, again, you would want holy, crit damage, crit chance. And then on the rings, you want the dream roll. Again, we're after that 56% cooldown reduction, which is gonna require the dream roll on the rings, which is crit damage, crit chance, cooldown reduction, socket on both rings. Now, fortunately, no matter what class you're playing, you're gonna be able to get rolls like this. This isn't class specific. So again, I've played Necro for 300 plus hours this season, and I found these on the Necro, so I was able to give them to my Crusader. Play tips, guys. Now, you never want to stop moving with this build unless it's once every 5 seconds to cast Punish. A, because you need to get the Hardened Senses buff up on yourself, which you have to do once every 5 seconds. Plus, conveniently, Focus and Restraint requires you to hit with a resource generating attack once every 5 seconds. So literally, the only time you're going to cast Punish is once every 5 seconds. But other than that, you never want to stop moving. You're going to see me in the gameplay, I'm just spinning around elites. I'm never actually stopping to spam Punish. Because again, Punish does no damage in this build. And plus, if you're standing still, you're not getting the Hexing Pants buff. You're actually penalizing yourself. So keep moving and only stop once every 5 seconds to cast Punish. Which brings me to the other point, and it's probably one of the biggest tips I give Diablo players, is never left click to move in Diablo. If you left click to move, you're probably going to target an enemy and you're going to cast punish, which is going to make you stop moving. So make sure you bind your force move to a key that you can spam. And to do that, again guys, you just go to key bindings here in the options tab and you go down to force move and make sure you bind that to something you can spam. I use the space bar. I think it's comfortable. A lot of people use like the mouse wheel, stuff like that. And also if you're using the numlock trick, guys, again, like we said in the video, you can't hold down your force move. You can't hold down any ability. And the legendary gem choices, we talked about it super briefly, but trapped, again, insanely powerful. Bane the powerful, always going to be up. More damage, great. And then esoteric alteration, more mitigation, which stacks really well with the diamonds in your gear. But hopefully that answers all you guys' questions. This thing is insanely powerful for this season and next season. As a lot of you guys know, nothing's really changing next season. So if you're looking for a class to play that's really, really powerful, really easy to play, Crusader, try it out. And if you guys don't know, we have a merchandise store out there on the internet. We'll leave a link in the description below. So if you want to impress the ladies with some sweet threads, make coffee taste better, make your phone run faster, make furniture look cooler, by all means check out the store down in the description below. Big shout out to all our current supporters and all the subs on Twitch. We appreciate all the things you guys do for the stream. I can't say it enough. Really makes this channel keep going. As always guys, like, subscribe, come over to Twitch, ask your questions. We love you guys. Peace out.